Have you ever noticed that the most confident voices are often the least informed? It's a pattern that philosopher Bertrand Russell noticed long ago, and it still holds true today. In a world where certainty often beats quiet doubt, Russell's insight feels more urgent than ever. He said, "The whole problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, and wiser people so full of doubts. Think about the people who talk the loudest online, or the politicians who promise quick fixes, or even the friend who insists they know everything. They're so sure, so certain, while people who really understand how things work are often careful, even unsure. That's because real knowledge forces you to see just how much more there is to learn." Today we're going to unpack why ignorance and overconfidence go hand in hand, and how you can avoid falling into the same trap. Let's dive in. Bertrand Russell was one of the sharpest minds of the 20th century. A philosopher, mathematician, and writer, he spent his life trying to make sense of why we act the way we do, and what makes us so sure of ourselves, even when we're wrong. Russell noticed something curious, a pattern that's as true today as it was 100 years ago. The less people actually know, the more certain they seem to be. In his words, "The whole problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, and wiser people so full of doubts." It sounds almost funny at first, like the punchline to a joke. But when you stop and think about it, you see it everywhere. The friend who insists on giving financial advice, even though he's never balanced a budget. The politician who promises to fix everything overnight, though he's never run a small shop, let alone a country. The loud voice in a room that drowns out everyone else, not because it's right, but because it's so sure it's right. Russell's insight hits home because it speaks to something deep in human nature. We like to feel sure. Certainty feels good. It feels safe. It's much easier to say, "I know exactly how it is," than to admit, "I'm not so sure. I need to learn more." But when we don't know what we don't know, we can't even see the gaps in our understanding. That's what Russell meant by the paradox of ignorance and confidence. People who know very little about something often don't even realize how complex it is, so they jump in with bold claims and firm answers. They don't stop to question themselves, because they don't know what questions to ask. Meanwhile, the people who really study and think and wrestle with big questions, the people who know just how complicated the world is, are usually more cautious. They're slower to speak. They know that every answer is just the start of another question. It's like driving a car for the first time. When you've never driven, you might think, "How hard can it be? Just push the gas and go." But once you learn the basics, you realize there's a lot more to it. Like watching your speed, checking your mirrors, feeling the road. And the more you drive, the more you see that even experienced drivers make mistakes. This same idea runs through every part of life. In science, it's the new student who's sure she's found the final answer, while the professor with decades of work behind him will tell you there's always more to learn. In business, it's the person who's never run a company telling everyone else how it should be done. In everyday life, it's the friend who's certain they're always right, even when they're clearly not. Russell didn't think this was just an odd quirk. He thought it was one of the biggest dangers to progress and truth. Because if we only listen to the loudest voices, if we reward certainty instead of careful thought, we end up following people who don't really understand what they're talking about, and that leads to mistakes that can cost us dearly. Today, psychologists have a name for this pattern, the Dunning-Kruger effect. But Russell saw it long before it had a label. He saw that confidence without understanding can be more dangerous than honest doubt. So how do we avoid this trap? Russell's answer was simple, even if it's not easy. Start by admitting what you don't know. Be humble enough to say, "I might be wrong." Look for other voices, other ideas, and challenge your own assumptions. Because the moment you start thinking you have all the answers, that's the moment you stop growing. That's why Russell's words still matter today. They remind us that wisdom isn't about being sure of everything. It's about being sure of how little we truly know. Russell's observation about ignorance and confidence laid the groundwork for what would later be called the Dunning-Kruger effect. This modern concept builds on his insight and shows exactly how and why the least informed can feel the most certain. Let's break it down. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a name for a pattern that Bertrand Russell saw so long ago. It's the idea that the people who know the least often think they know the most. They don't see the gaps in their knowledge, so they don't see any reason to doubt themselves. It was first tested by two psychologists in the late 1990s, David Dunning and Dunning-Kruger. They ran a series of studies and found something odd but familiar. People who did the worst on tests of logic, grammar, or humor often thought they had done the best. Meanwhile, those who actually scored the highest tended to underestimate themselves. The researchers asked people to rate how good they thought they were at a task. The least skilled people gave themselves the highest scores, while the most skilled people gave themselves much lower scores. The difference wasn't just small, it was huge. Think of it like climbing a mountain. At the bottom, you can't see how high the mountain really goes. It all looks easy from a distance, but as you start to climb, you begin to see the twists and turns, the cliffs and the loose rocks. You realize it's not so simple. The Dunning-Kruger effect is that moment at the bottom when you think you've already made it, because you can't see what's ahead. The less you know, the easier it is to believe you know enough. In real life, we see this all the time. A friend who's never cooked a meal in his life might be the first to tell a chef how to run a kitchen. A brand new manager might think he's a genius leader, even though he's never led a team before. A person who reads a few headlines online thinks he's an expert in climate science or foreign policy. Meanwhile, the people who really study these topics, who have spent years or decades learning and testing and failing, are often the ones who say, "I'm still learning. I don't have all the answers." They've seen how much there is to know, so they're careful. They're aware of their limits. The Dunning-Kruger effect isn't just about knowledge. It's about self-awareness. If you don't know much about something, you might not even know what questions to ask. You don't see your own mistakes because you don't know what mistakes look like. But as you learn more, you get better at spotting what you don't know. You become more aware of your weak spots. And that's why real experts often sound so cautious, while beginners sound so sure. This effect doesn't mean we're doomed to be clueless. In fact, it's a reminder that the first step to real wisdom is humility, to question ourselves, to look for evidence and not just feelings. Bertrand Russell put it this way: "The fundamental cause of the trouble is that in the modern world the stupid are cocksure while the intelligent are full of doubt." He wasn't just talking about a quirk of human nature. He was warning us about what happens when loud, confident voices get more attention than careful, quiet ones. So the next time you see someone who's so sure they're right about politics or science or even everyday life, ask yourself, do they really know what they're talking about? Or are they stuck at the bottom of the mountain, too sure of themselves to see the climb ahead? Understanding the Dunning-Kruger effect can help us all pause before we speak. It can help us be a little slower to judge, a little quicker to listen. And it can help us remember that real knowledge isn't about having all the answers. It's about knowing how many questions still remain. When we see how the Dunning-Kruger effect works, it's easy to spot in our daily lives. But here's the thing, it's not just a personal bias, it's also baked into how our society rewards confidence over caution. Let's look at how this effect doesn't just stay in our heads, but shapes the world around us. We've seen how the Dunning-Kruger effect makes people who know the least the most certain. But here's the bigger problem. Society doesn't just ignore this effect. It actually rewards it. Look around. In politics, media, and even in everyday conversations, the person who speaks the loudest is often the one people believe. It's not because they're right. It's because we're drawn to certainty. Think about social media. It's full of people who are absolutely sure they have the answer to everything, from how to fix the economy to what diet is best. And these confident voices rise to the top. Posts that are full of anger, bold claims, or wild certainty get the most clicks. They spread faster and reach more people. Why? Because our brains like clarity. We're wired to want easy answers and bold statements. If someone says, "I'm not sure, let me think about it," that doesn't grab our attention. But if they say, "This is how it is, no doubt about it," we stop and look. It's the same in the news. Talk shows and debates reward people who interrupt, shout, and act like they've already figured it all out. That makes for good TV, even if it's not good for truth. This isn't just a modern problem. Bertrand Russell saw it in his time too. He said that society often prefers the loud and certain over the quiet and thoughtful. He warned that this is why bad ideas can take hold. even when they're built on ignorance. In real life, we see this in every corner of society. In the workplace, the person who talks the most in meetings is seen as the expert, even if they're not. In school, the student who raises their hand first might not have the best answer, but they get noticed. And it's not just about opinions. It affects real decisions. In politics, leaders who sound sure of themselves, even when they're wrong, can win elections and shape policies that impact millions. In business, a confident pitch can sell a flawed idea. In science, bad research can get published if it's dressed up with confident claims. The truth is that confidence is contagious. When one person acts sure, others start to doubt their own views. It's easy to think, maybe they're right, look how sure they are. But that's a trap. Russell believed that when society gives a microphone to the most confident, it drowns out the voices of those who know how complex the world really is. He warned that we can't rely on the volume of a voice to judge the truth of its words. This isn't to say that all confident people are wrong. Sometimes they're right. But when we reward confidence without questioning its basis, we create a world where the loudest voice is mistaken for the wisest. The cost of this can be huge. History shows us how confident ignorance can lead to wars, economic crashes, and endless arguments that go nowhere. Because when certainty wins over curiosity, we all lose the chance to learn. So next time you hear someone speak with total certainty, pause. Ask yourself, do they really understand what they're talking about? Or is it just the echo of a system that values bold claims over careful thought? Society is set up to amplify the loudest voices, but we don't have to be swept up in that noise. Russell's wisdom reminds us, the person who questions, who doubts, and who keeps learning, that's the voice worth listening to. When society rewards confident ignorance, it's not just an abstract problem. It leads to real, often serious consequences. Let's see how this dangerous mix of overconfidence and lack of knowledge has played out in the world around us, sometimes with devastating results. When confident ignorance takes center stage, it's not just a harmless quirk. It can cause real damage. History offers us many examples where overconfidence, mixed with a lack of deep understanding, led to serious problems. Let's look at one clear case, the 2008 financial crisis. Before the crisis, many experts in finance and government felt very sure about their models and predictions. Banks created complex financial products they claimed were safe, and policymakers trusted these claims without enough skepticism. These models were supposed to measure risk and keep the economy stable, but they didn't see the cracks underneath. Why? Because the people in charge didn't fully understand the complexity of the system. They were confident in their knowledge, but they missed important warning signs. This was classic Dunning-Kruger in action. High confidence paired with blind spots in understanding. When the housing market started to collapse, the confidence quickly turned to panic. Banks failed, markets crashed, and millions of people lost their jobs and homes. The effects were felt worldwide, not just in America. This crisis was a painful lesson in what happens when overconfidence rules decisions that affect everyone. If the decision makers had embraced a bit more humility, if they had questioned their models and assumptions more, they might have avoided the disaster or at least reduced its impact. But the financial crisis is just one example. Similar stories play out in politics, public health, and even everyday life. Consider the early responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. In many places, leaders and experts gave confident statements that later turned out to be wrong or incomplete. Mixed messages and overconfidence made it harder for people to trust guidance and take precautions. This shows that confident ignorance isn't just a personal problem. It can shape how entire societies respond to crises. When people in power act like they have all the answers, it discourages questioning and slows down learning. That's dangerous, because no one knows everything. The world is too complex for that. Bertrand Russell warned us about this decades ago. He said that society often values those who shout the loudest, even if they don't understand what they're talking about. And when important decisions are made this way, the results can be disastrous. But it's not only about the big, headline-making events. On a smaller scale, confident ignorance can ruin relationships, cost careers, and waste resources. Imagine a doctor who's too sure about a diagnosis without double-checking. or a teacher who refuses to consider new methods because they're confident the old way is best. The real-world consequences of this blind confidence remind us why intellectual humility is so important. It's not weakness to admit you don't know. It's the first step to learning, to improving, and to making better choices. So, when you see confident claims, whether in the news, at work, or in your own mind, remember this: certainty without knowledge can be a dangerous thing, and wisdom begins with recognizing what you don't know. These real-world disasters show just how costly confident ignorance can be. But today, the problem isn't limited to boardrooms or governments. It's amplified by the very technology we use every day. Let's explore how digital platforms create echo chambers that fuel overconfidence and make it even harder to see the full picture. In the past, ignorance mixed with overconfidence was mostly a problem in smaller circles, offices, political debates, or social groups. But now, in the digital age, this problem has grown far beyond what Bertrand Russell could have imagined. The internet, especially social media, acts like a giant amplifier for confident ignorance. How does this happen? It's all about what's called the echo chamber. Imagine you're in a room where everyone says the same thing you believe. Every time you speak, people cheer you on. No one challenges your ideas, and no one offers a different view. Over time, you feel more and more sure you're right, even if your ideas are flawed. That's exactly what happens online. Social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube use complex algorithms designed to keep you engaged. These algorithms learn what kind of content you like, what makes you click, comment, or share. Then they show you more of the same. If you like posts that confirm your beliefs, you get more posts like that. If you react strongly to a certain topic, your feed gets filled with similar content. This creates a filter bubble, a digital world where your views are constantly reinforced and opposing ideas are pushed aside. The more you see the same opinions, the more confident you feel. But that confidence is often based on a narrow slice of reality. This effect is dangerous because it makes people less likely to question their beliefs. When everyone around you agrees, you don't feel the need to doubt or learn. You end up with a stronger us versus them mentality, where anyone who disagrees isn't just wrong, they're an enemy. We see this clearly in issues like climate change denial, vaccine skepticism, and political polarization. People in these echo chambers share the same stories, facts, and feelings, which makes their convictions unshakable. Meanwhile, facts and nuance get drowned out by emotional certainty. It's important to understand that the echo chamber isn't just about what people post. It's about how the technology directs your attention. Algorithms are designed to boost content that creates strong reactions, especially anger or fear, because that keeps you hooked. The more extreme or certain a post sounds, the more likely it is to go viral. Bertrand Russell's warning about valuing confident voices over thoughtful ones fits perfectly here. The digital world rewards bold claims and quick judgments, not careful reasoning or humility. This means that the loudest voices online are often the least informed, but the most influential. But there's a flip side. The digital age also offers tools for intellectual humility and learning, if we use them wisely. Access to diverse perspectives, expert knowledge, and thoughtful discussion is just a few clicks away. The challenge is to break out of the echo chamber and seek these out actively. It means following voices that challenge your views, reading deeply rather than skimming headlines, and being open to changing your mind. It means recognizing when the internet is feeding you certainty and choosing instead to embrace doubt and curiosity. Russell's timeless truth shows us that wisdom comes not from loud certainty, but from the quiet willingness to admit what we don't know. In a world of digital noise, that humility is more valuable and more radical than ever. With digital echo chambers feeding our need for simple, clear answers, it's no wonder so many of us cling tightly to certainty. But why do we crave this feeling so much, even when it blinds us? Let's explore the deep psychological reasons behind our hunger for certainty and why it can keep us trapped in ignorance. Why do we cling so hard to certainty? Why does being sure feel so good, even when it might be wrong? To understand this, we need to look inside the human mind, where comfort and survival are always top priorities. At its core, certainty offers a sense of control. Life is messy and unpredictable, Every day we face complex problems, confusing information, and situations full of unknowns. When we find an answer that feels solid, our brain rewards us with a feeling of safety. It's like a warm blanket in a cold, confusing world. Psychologists explain this craving for certainty as a coping mechanism. Our minds prefer clear answers because they reduce anxiety and mental effort. It takes less energy to accept a simple truth than to constantly question, doubt, or sift through complicated facts. Imagine you're walking in a dense fog. If someone confidently points to a clear path, you want to follow them, even if you don't know if that path is safe. The certainty of direction feels better than the uncertainty of wandering lost. That's how our brain often works, seeking certainty to avoid the discomfort of doubt. Bertrand Russell saw this clearly. He understood that certainty can be seductive but also blinding. When we feel sure, we stop questioning. And stopping questioning means stopping learning. It's the moment when wisdom slips away and foolishness takes hold. But this craving for certainty doesn't just happen inside our heads. It's deeply tied to our emotions and social needs. Being certain makes us feel confident and respected. When we speak with conviction, others tend to listen and trust us more. This social reward can reinforce overconfidence, even when it's not justified. In many situations, admitting "I don't know" feels risky. It can make us vulnerable or appear weak. But the truth is, admitting ignorance is the foundation of true learning and growth. Without it, we build our beliefs on shaky ground. Think about a child learning to ride a bike. At first, they wobble and fall, unsure and cautious. But with every fall, they learn a little more. Over time, they gain balance and confidence, not from blind certainty, but from understanding their limits and practicing carefully. The same principle applies to knowledge and wisdom. Confidence without humility is dangerous. Humility with curiosity leads to deeper understanding. Our brains are wired to seek patterns and clear answers quickly. That's why we sometimes jump to conclusions or hold on to beliefs long after evidence has changed. It's easier to stick with what feels right than to rewire our thinking. Yet the world is full of complexity, paradoxes, and shades of gray. Embracing uncertainty is uncomfortable but necessary. It keeps us alert, humble, and open-minded. It helps us see the bigger picture rather than just the comfortable corner. Russell's timeless truth reminds us that wisdom isn't about having all the answers. It's about recognizing the limits of what we know and being willing to explore beyond them. So next time you feel a rush of certainty, pause and ask yourself, is this confidence earned by knowledge? Or is it just the mind-seeking comfort? The answer could make all the difference between falling into foolishness or stepping onto the path of true wisdom. Understanding why we so deeply crave certainty helps explain why overconfidence is such a common trap. But recognizing this urge is only the first step. The real challenge, and the real wisdom, lies in learning how to embrace doubt, question our beliefs, and walk the path of intellectual humility. Let's explore what that path looks like and why it matters more than ever. If craving certainty is our mind's default setting, then intellectual humility is the switch we need to flip to see the world more clearly. But what exactly is intellectual humility? Simply put, it's the ability to recognize the limits of our knowledge and to accept that we don't have all the answers. It's about being comfortable with doubt, questions, and the unknown. Bertrand Russell believed this was the heart of true wisdom. He argued that real knowledge begins with admitting what we don't know. This may sound simple, but it's far from easy. Our brains resist doubt because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. It shakes the foundation of what we rely on to make sense of life. But stepping onto this shaky ground is necessary if we want to grow. Let's think about this with a simple example. Imagine you're a cook trying a new recipe. If you insist you know everything about cooking, you might skip important steps or ignore advice, and the dish could flop. But if you're humble, willing to follow instructions, experiment, and learn from mistakes, your chances of success skyrocket. The same principle applies to how we think and learn. Intellectual humility means treating our beliefs as working hypotheses rather than fixed facts. It means being curious instead of defensive. When someone challenges your opinion, instead of shutting down or arguing harder, you listen. You ask yourself, could I be wrong? What might I be missing? This doesn't mean being weak or indecisive. On the contrary, it takes strength to question your own ideas. It takes courage to say, "I don't know," or "Help me understand." It's a mark of a mature mind. In practice, intellectual humility looks like this: reading widely, seeking out views that clash with your own, and having honest conversations without the need to win every argument. It means embracing complexity and nuance instead of settling for easy answers. One powerful tool for building humility is curiosity. Curiosity opens the door to new knowledge and breaks down the walls of certainty. When you approach ideas with genuine interest and a desire to learn, you start to see the world differently. You stop assuming you have all the answers and instead become a lifelong student. Russell warned that ignoring our ignorance makes us blind to our own mistakes. But once we acknowledge it, we start to see the edges of our knowledge and can push beyond them. This awareness guards us against the fool's confidence, the loud certainty that masks confusion. Think about conversations you've had with truly wise people. They don't dominate discussions with loud proclamations. Instead, they listen carefully, ask thoughtful questions, and admit when they don't know something. They invite dialogue and growth rather than debate and closure. Intellectual humility also protects us from the dangers of groupthink and social pressure. When we believe we must always be right to fit in or be respected, we close ourselves off. But when we accept uncertainty and the possibility of error, we create space for honest exchange and real progress. In today's world, where misinformation spreads fast and opinions are loud, intellectual humility is more important than ever. It helps us navigate conflicting information, resist easy answers, and think critically. So how do we cultivate this humility? Start small. Practice asking questions instead of giving answers. When you feel sure, pause and consider what you might not know. Read opposing views without judgment. Embrace mistakes as opportunities to learn. Russell's timeless message is clear. Wisdom is not about knowing everything. It's about knowing that you don't, and being brave enough to keep searching anyway. By choosing intellectual humility, we step off the path of foolish certainty and onto the road of genuine understanding. It's a path that requires patience, courage, and openness. But the reward is a clearer mind and a wiser life. Now that we've seen how embracing intellectual humility can protect us from the pitfalls of overconfidence, it's up to each of us to put this wisdom into practice. The journey toward deeper understanding begins with simple steps: questioning, listening, and admitting what we don't know. So before we wrap up, let's take a moment to consider how you can apply these ideas in your own life and join the conversation that challenges the status quo. So, what can you take away from all this? Next time you find yourself absolutely sure about something, pause. Ask yourself, what don't I know? What could I be missing? That small moment of doubt is the start of real wisdom. Share this video if it made you think. And let's spread the idea that being humble about what we know isn't a weakness. It's a strength. It's a way to fight back against the noise of confident fools who shout loudest but understand least. Remember, true courage isn't in always having the answers. It's in being willing to question, learn, and grow. Intellectual humility might just be the most radical act we can practice today. If you want to be part of this conversation, drop your thoughts below. What surprised you? Where have you seen confident ignorance in your own life? Let's talk about it. Because in a world full of noise and certainty, the smartest thing we can do is to know our limits and never stop searching beyond them. Thanks for watching, and keep questioning.